In today's session, we're going to talk about what is privacy, and is it a philosophy? Is it a law? What is this thing that we have to deal with every day, and that's affecting more and more of our practices in the advertising industry? Let's go. What do you think about like the meaning is sort of privacy? I think it's evolved quite a lot, obviously, since the 90s, where it was just about like drafting up a privacy policy for your website at early 2000s. And as advertising's evolved and regulation has stepped in, basically what is privacy, and from in simple terms, and what it means in terms of how they need to behave as companies and even as consumers. Like what should we
Sure.
expect from, yeah.
If you take Europe, for example, where we've got the most ambitious data protection legislation there, GDPR. What they've done is they mistook compliance with having consent. And this is very typical, but it is partially denial of reality. Because the reality boils down to something very simple, is ownership. And the first 20 years of the digital industry, the notion, which was ingrained in many companies' brains, is I capture data. I collect data because data is free, and the work I do on the data is a value I bring to the internet ecosystem. Without me, there is no internet ecosystem. And that's the deal that the ad tech ecosystem thinks it has with the user. But what has never been admitted, and which still is the reality, is the regulator is saying differently. The regulator is saying the data you're collecting is not your data. It is the data belonging to the user. So that data, when you drop a cookie and you capture information about that user through the code that you've dropped on their device, it's only because the user is very happy for you to do so, and it's only for a certain amount of time, which has always to be limited. And that is, I think, the big gap in understanding and the reconciliation which has not happened between the industry and the spirit of the law.
Do you think there are any publishers that would prevent access to their site if a user does not consent to share their data with them?
Let's start with Europe. So some publishers are doing that, okay? And so basically you have to accept cookies in order to have access to the free content. It is a reality. It does happen. The interpretation has been they can't do this, but there is a bit of an evolution, possibly, that some people are talking about. But to summarize, because the consent has to be an affirmative action, it has to be free. And in order to be free, that consent cannot be conditional to access to the content. So to summarize, if you're a publisher and you offer free content to everyone, legally, under the GDPR, you cannot choose, oh, okay, I'm going to offer free content only to those who accept to, cookies on their device, basically to accept to give their data for free. That bargain, that deal, okay, it's only in the mind of the publisher. The reality, that's not the way the regulator sees it. Now, if a publisher says, but that's totally unfair, I live off, the only reason I offer free content is because I can monetize it with advertising. Then the regulator will say, nothing prevents you from having part free content and part paid content. This is why, you take all the premium European publishers, content is not free anymore. Whether you accept or not cookies on your device, they look free, but they're not. All the major publishers, you arrive on the site, you see, I would say 90% of the articles of the big news publishers today in Europe, you can't read the end. You have to subscribe. You
It's
have to give money. So it's not a free content model anymore.
it's surprising that we can't that legislators don't see that consent as a currency. It's really surprising to me.
Yeah, but they don't. And the real reason is they consider that data is something which is very precious, and they want to help the user, the consumer, the data subject, as they say in Europe, to be really protective about their data. And so that's why, yes, free content against free data is not a deal that is well seen by the European regulator.
Do you know if it's different in the U.S., for example?
Yeah, basically, you can if you can basically reward users who give their data more than the users who don't. So you've got ways of playing that you don't have under the GDPR. So the situation is a bit different. Remember, the GDPR is probably from a publisher point of view or from a tech company point of view. The GDPR is the toughest. The GDPR wants to protect consumers and data subjects, and also because it dates back to also different philosophies about what constitutes privacy between Europe and the United States. Let's not forget that. The difference between Europe and the United States with regards to privacy. I know this is not obviously a political philosophy conversation, but it's in one continent you had the war and you had the Iron Curtain. In the other, you didn't. And that really, at the end of the day, is what is behind the different interpretations of privacy. But that is what influences our ecosystem today.